Right friends, welcome back to second capsule. This is the most important one, this Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee. This is the apex body for clearing the genetically modified crops. It cleared or approved the commercial production of GM mustard, and this is developed by the Delhi University scientists, and this apex body is under the Ministry of Environment. Finally, government has to clear this. And as I have already stated, the recommendation is required to be approved by the Environment Ministry, and here GM mustard is developed by the Delhi University based Center for Genetic Manipulation of Crop Plants, right? And financial support is given by Department of Biotechnology and NDDB. And here, as per the news report, only GM cotton, a non-food crop, has been permitted in our country. And if you look at these issues, GM cotton, this was permitted somewhere around 2002 or so, and these seeds were developed by Monsanto, that is multinational company, and BT brinjal, this was developed in 2010, and this was developed by Mahiko with the association of some multinational companies. And here government has not gone ahead. The then environmental minister has said no, and now GM mustard, GEAC cleared it. Now we have to wait and see what the decision of the government is. And here another important aspect is there is a case pending in the Supreme Court, and Swadeshi Jagran Manch, this is an affiliate of RSS, this is also opposing GM crops, and Niti Aayog backed the introduction of GM crops, and GM technology has been used extensively for hybrid seed production in rapeseed, a sister crop of mustard, right? Having learned this, findings of the subcommittee of GEAC, the name is Dhara Mustard Hybrid 11 or DMH11, and this is safe for human consumption, animal feed and environment as per the subcommittee's report of GEAC. And the subcommittee also said it is highly unlikely that it will invade natural ecosystems and poses negligible threat to the biodiversity. So the point to convey is, here this genetically modified organism will not cause any damage to the ecosystem, right? Another point is it contains 3 genes sourced from soil bacterium. So here this is crossing across various species. So that is the meaning of genetic modification. And another important point is the bar gene, which made the plant resistant to a herbicide brand named Basta, and this is the product incidentally sold by multinational company Bayer Crop Science, right? So this is about findings of the subcommittee. And if you look at GM crops across the world, in fact some of the countries, America and Brazil as well as Argentina, they are for GM crops. And if you look at the world total GM crop acreage, in fact 3 countries, USA, Brazil and Argentina, account for more than around 75% of total crop acreage, and this is one aspect. Second aspect is 4 crops account for maximum acreage, that is corn, soya bean, cotton and canola. Please look into this. This is corn, soya bean, then cotton, canola seeds. So these 4 crops account for maximum cultivation of GM crops, and GM crops are grown in more than 28 countries. And here one important aspect is countries like USA, Brazil, Argentina go for GM crops, but several European countries are against GM crops. This is the important point to note. And at present, around 10% of the world's arable land is planted with GM crops, right? So let us go ahead. Here, what is genetic modification? Genetic modification is, DNA means deoxyribonucleic acid. It is the material inside the nucleus of cells carrying genetic information. So here, transfer of genes within and across species boundaries to produce improved organisms, that is genetic modification. Here certain enzymes cut DNA pieces and then join them into the DNA of another organism. So, when DNA of one organism is cut and placed in another organism, that is known as genetic modification. And if you look at the food crops, there are arguments for GM food crops. The arguments are it will increase the yields, and another point is it can feed increased populations. But the argument against is it is unethical and concerns about human health if GM foods are eaten, right? And if you go ahead, how the genetic modification was done in mustard. Here the mustard flower, please understand, mustard flower has both male and female parts. So, it is predominantly self-pollinated crop, and please look into this picture. This gives example of self-pollination. And now in genetic modification, what is being done? One of the two parental lines to be made male sterile, one part will be made sterile. The reason is it will not be in a position to produce the offspring. That is the meaning of sterile. So, here one of the two parental lines will be made male sterile, so that the plant is forced to cross-pollinate with other line to produce hybrid seed, and farmers can grow the hybrid seed and achieve higher production. This cross-pollination can be done in two ways. One is conventional breeding method of hybrid, and second one is to go for genetic modification method, right? The conventional breeding methods of hybrid seed could not give better results, but the best results are with the GM method. Then the first point is how the genetic modification in mustard is done. Here a protein obtained from a bacterium. So, instead of conventional method, a gene is taken from a bacterium. So, that is all about this genetic modification. So, here a protein obtained from a bacterium is used to induce male sterility in one of the parental line by inhibiting the production of pollen and preventing self-pollination. The crux of the matter here is, here a protein is taken from a bacterium, right, and that is used to induce male sterility. That means the pollination or self-pollination is prevented. So, now by preventing self-pollination, it has to go for cross-pollination because one of the parental lines is sterile, right? And please look into this picture. So, this self-pollination is prevented. Now, another protein obtained from the same bacterium is introduced into another parental line to produce an inhibitor that counteracts the sterility causing enzyme, right? And subsequently, the transgenes are expressed in the male part of the flower only in a layer of cells that feed developing pollen, and finally, the hybrid plant is obtained by crossing the two lines, is fertile and produces seed which farmers can harvest. This is all about genetic modification in mustard, and one important aspect is why genetic modification in food crops is required. And the most important is to increase resistance to abiotic stresses. What is the meaning of abiotic stress? Abiotic stress means the stress because of drought, extreme temperature, salinity, and to increase resistance to abiotic stresses, this genetic modification may become necessary. Second one is biotic resistance. So, what is the difference between abiotic and biotic? Abiotic means lifeless, like drought, temperature, salinity, like that. Biotic means that which involves life, like attack by pests, like attack by insects, viruses, pathogens, etc. So, the point to note is to introduce both biotic and abiotic resistance. Then the third point is to increase the nutritional value of food crops. One example is golden rice, and the next one is for production of recombinant medicines and industrial products such as monoclonal antibodies, vaccines, etc. So here the point to note is GM plants are ubiquitous in USA but absent in several European countries. In fact, European countries and United States of America differ with regard to genetically modified crops. Europe is very strict in genetically modified crops. Then why there is lot of opposition by civil society groups in our country? Civil society groups feel that GM mustard is unnecessary because there are existing local and hybrid varieties as well as farm practices which can increase the yield. Then one more point is contamination from GM mustard is fast and irrevocable, and they claim that genetic modification is not safe for human beings. Next, entire data was not released about the safety tests. Then new genes for male sterility and tolerance towards weed killing chemicals called herbicides, and the herbicides in this case are associated with big MNCs like Bayer. So as the gene is taken which is associated with MNCs like Bayer, the organizations or civil society groups say that by using herbicide tolerant genes in plants locks farmers into the select brands of agrochemicals, right? So here activists have protested over the decades that using herbicide tolerant genes, and please don't forget, when herbicide tolerant gene is used, then it locks farmers into using select brand of agrochemicals mostly manufactured by multinational companies, right? Because of all these things, there is opposition from civil society groups overall across the world. If you see, I listed out 5 points proposed by proponents of GM crops, opposed by opponents of GM crops. The proponents of GM crops say that higher crop yields supplement the incomes of farmers. So genetic modification is necessary, and this will immensely benefit farmers in developing countries who are primarily doing subsistence agriculture, and at the same time it will ensure food security to the growing millions of world population. The second point is they reduce the need for pesticides and herbicides, and at the same time reduce manpower requirement. Overall it will be economical. The next point is food quality can be improved, shelf life will be improved, and especially this assumed significance for perishables like fruits as well as vegetables. So vegetables and fruits can be engineered to stay fresh for longer time, and this is specifically needed and significant for developing countries like India where proper cold storage facilities are not available. Then the next point is GM crops can be engineered to withstand weather fluctuations and extremes. What I mean to say is this abiotic resistance can be increased. Then they can provide sufficient yields despite insufficient rains. The next point is they can be engineered to increase the nutrients, and golden rice is one example. So it is significant if you look at the situation that substantial population are suffering because of malnutrition, right? These are the views of proponents. If you look at the opponents' views, the first one is a larger debate is going on with regard to the effects on human health. There is also a fear that genetic modification may lead to emergence of new diseases in future. The second point is there were cases which triggered allergy in human beings, and new allergens can be produced when genes are mixed across different species. What is the meaning of across different species? One is the plant kingdom, another one is bacteria. So, one bacterium is taken and it is introduced into plant kingdom. So, that is known as mixed across different species. So, here new allergens can be produced when genes are mixed across different species. Third one is organisms in the ecosystem can be harmed. Entire ecosystem may be disturbed by removing one pest that harms the crops. The food chain is being broken, which may hamper biodiversity. Some of the organisms may be extinct in due course of time, which may result in disruption to biodiversity. The next one is because of patent rights, only few companies are enjoying monopoly in GM crops. Example is Monsanto, Syngenta, Bayer. They are the leading players and it may lead to exploitation in developing countries. But however, in GM mustard case, exploitation may not be there because it is developed with public funding. Then the last point is, in due course of time, these GM crops may develop resistance to insecticides and agriculture may become costly at that juncture. Right friends, we deliberated the views of proponents, the views of opponents and the case of GM mustard. So, please go through the capsule. It will be highly useful to you. Have a nice day. Thank you.